Today I will show you how you can add simple multi-language support in your game. If you want to help support this channel, hit the subscribe button below this video, turn on notification so you will not miss any future episode I release. So as you can see on the screen, I have created two buttons and then added text on it. So this scene does not do anything, it's just a simple main menu scene without any graphics. And I have at the top, I have the drop-down where I can select different languages. So I currently support the English, Polish and the French language. So if I select the Polish language, all of the text on the bottom has changed. If I select the French language, I have different text. And all of this implementation, all of these words from different languages are taken from the Cvs file. So here is the CSV file. And as you can see, I have the ID for the specific text. I have the English translation, Polish translation, and then French translation. And depend on the language I select from the drop-down, I'm just pulling different words out from this file. So this is very useful implementation. If you want to have like multiple words in your file and then you want to send someone to translate the specific word for you, you can use this CSV file to actually provide someone and then load it to your game. So let's actually see how this all is implemented inside the Unity. So I have created the empty Unity project and I'm currently using the Unity 2021.2. This is the beta version, but this implementation should be supported in any older version. So first thing I usually do, I usually switch the build to the Android. So I just gone to the file, build settings and selected the Android platform and then hit switch. And then I have changed also the aspect ratio to 1080 by 1920, so I have the nice canvas displayed. So let's now add two buttons to this. So right click UI button. The first button I'm gonna call it will be play button. Let's set the width to be, let's say 730, and then height to be 250. Okay, so this button is big enough. Let's set the X position to be 0. And I will move it down on Y position. And now we need to make this text bigger. So I'm gonna go to the text. Let's put the text play. Change the font size to 75. So everything is nicely displayed. And make sure the alignment is in the middle. So now let's add the game over button. So just right click on the play, duplicate, and let's call it the game over. And update the text. Game over. Actually, we don't need the enter here. Okay, and let's move this game over to be below the play button. So as you see, we have two different buttons. Let's now add the drop down. So right click, UI, and then drop down. The drop down is supported in this version of Unity. So I'm gonna call this drop down multi-language support. So select language or language drop down. And now let's switch to the scene view. And as you see, our drop down is quite small. So I will change the width for the drop down to be 320 and height to be 60. So the drop down is big enough now, but we need to resize the text. So let's go to the drop down, select the label, and I will change the font size to be 40. And make sure the alignment is in the middle. And now we need to change the template as well, because otherwise, if you enable this template, you will see that the option text is very small. So let's enable the template so we can see the changes. Let's go to the viewport. The viewport size is correct. Let's go to the content. So the content, as you see, is quite small. So I will just make it a bit bigger. Maybe like that. So I will just copy this height, go under the content, select the item, and make sure the height of the item is the same as the content. Okay. And now we can go under the item, select the item label, and I will change the font size to be 40. And I will just position it to the middle. So the option and then the option itself text is big enough for us to see. So now I'll just go to the template and then disable this template. Okay, let's try to run it. So if I just press play, as you see, I have the option A and option B. From the dropdown, everything works fine. Actually, let's position this dropdown to be in the middle. So I'll just change the X position to 0. And now while we have this dropdown selected, let's scroll down to the options and make sure you remove all of these options because we won't need them. We're going to load the option from the file, from the script. So the option should be empty. So everything is cleared out. So now let's actually add the Cvs file. So I'm gonna use the Microsoft Excel, but you can use the OpenOffice or any other program you like. So here is the Microsoft Excel. I'm just gonna create few columns. So the first column will be the ID. The second column will be the language we want to support. So first one will be English. So EN, then Polish, PL, French, FR, and any other language you like. You can put as many languages as you like. I'm just gonna stick with those 3. And then for every single text we want to create a separate ID. So first ID I'm gonna put is the play. So ID play and then ID game over. Okay, let's resize these columns. And actually I'm gonna copy the translated text. I have used the Google Translator to actually translate everything. So everything is correct. Hopefully the French language is correct as well. I'm not 100% sure about that. So once you've done it, we need to save this file. So I'm gonna save it. So I'm gonna save this file inside my project in the asset folder, and I will create another folder inside. So let's right click, new folder, and I will call this folder resources. Resources. Make sure you name this folder the same because this is the standard folder name for the Unity, and whatever you place inside this folder, it will be included inside your APK and any other build you make. So I'm gonna place my file inside the resources. Let's call this file to be localization, and then save as a type. So I'm gonna save it as CSV UTF-8. And then let's click save. Okay, we can close this file now. And then when you go back to Unity, your file should be under the resources and then localization. If you try to go to this folder and then go to the resources again, right click on this localization and you can edit it inside with the Notepad++ or Notepad. You will see the structure of the file. So this is how the file looks in the raw format. So we're going to use this structure to actually read this file back inside the Unity using scripts. So let's go back to Unity now and let's start adding some scripts. So we will need 2 scripts. So inside the asset folder, let's create new folder, scripts. Okay, inside the scripts folder, let's add the C# script. The first script I'm going to create is Cvs parser. Let's add another one. So another one will be language dropdown. So this script will be used to actually populate our dropdown with the options. And then let's add one more. And this is gonna be the localization text. Localization text. Okay, let's open the Visual Studio. Okay, so let's start from implementing our SVS parser. So this file will be responsible from reading out the data from our Cvs file. So we don't need any start and update function. So let's add few variables. So first one will be static private, and this is going to be the list of strings, and let's call it language list will be equal to new list of strings. The next one will be static private, and this is going to be the dictionary and this dictionary will store the ID, so string, and then list of strings, and this is gonna be the language this dictionary, and will be equal to new dictionary. Okay, so we have added two structures. So the dictionary, we switch back to our Cvs file, as you can see, the dictionary will store this column as the key. So we're gonna search using the ID, and then the list of the words for the specific ID. So we're gonna store all of these words inside the list for this specific ID. And then when we select this ID, we can specify which item we want to read from the list. So this is what this dictionary is doing. So let's create the first function. So first one will be static, public, and we're gonna return the string array, and we're gonna call it split line, and then we're gonna pass string line. Okay, so this function will just go, and by using the regular expression, we're gonna split the line of our Cvs file. So in order to do that, we need to include the system link. So at the top, I'm gonna add using system.link. And then let's implement the split line function. So I'm gonna just put the return, and we're gonna return the from system.text.regular expression.match m in system.text.regular expression.regex.match matches, and then we, as an input, we're gonna put our line and then the pattern. So I'm not gonna bother to type it. I'm just gonna copy this pattern from my implementation. So we can just copy this pattern again, and then let's add another parameters, which will be the option, the match collection. So system dot text dot regular expression dot regex options dot explicit capture. Okay, and then right after the braces, we're gonna call the select m dot group at one dot value. Okay, and as you see, this is the error because we need to return the array of the string. So right at the end, I'm gonna put the dot to array. Okay, so basically what we want to do, we want to split our line from our Cvs file. So if I open the file in the raw format, as you see, we have this line, and we're gonna just split it by using this comma, but I just put the regular expression to actually split the words. So we can do either way. You can just search for the comma, or you can just use the regular expression as me. It doesn't really matter, you need to just split the line. So once we implement this function, let's add another one. So static, public, we're gonna return the list of string, and let's call this function get available languages. Okay, and then we want to actually check if our language list dot count is equal to 0. If it is, that means we haven't loaded this language list yet. So we're gonna read the language list. So first, let's call the var Cvs file will be equal to, and because we have placed our CVS under the resource folder, we can use the resources.load, and we're gonna load the text asset, and we need to just put the correct name of our file. So if you go back to the Unity, our file name under the resources is called Localization. So I'm just gonna copy this name so I don't make any typo. Let's go back to the scripts, and inside this resource.load I just need to put the name of the file, okay, without the extension. So now we can call the string array lines will be equal to cvs file dot text dot split, and let's split it by new line and then 0. Okay, so we're gonna split this this file by lines, and now let's populate actually our language list. So language list will be equal to new list of strings, and we're gonna call our split line, and we're gonna pass our lines at 0. The reason we're passing the lines as 0 is because in our CVS file our languages are stored at the first line. So if you see the file, you see our languages are stored here on the first line, and we need to, of course, exclude our ID. So in order to do that, I think the simplest way will be to just remove the first element. So language list dot remove at 0. Okay, and then from this function we're gonna return language list. Okay, so there is one more function we need to add here. So we need to add the function to actually search our word by ID. So static, and we're gonna call public string get text from ID, and we want to pass the string ID, and we of course want to pass the integer with the index of the language we want to request. So this function again going to use the similar logic. So first of all we want to check if our language dictionary is loaded. So we want to check if our language dictionary dot count is equal to 0. If it is, we want to do exactly the same as in the previous function. So I'm just going to copy those first two lines, paste it here. So we're going to load our localization file, and we want to split by lines, and then we want to put the for loop. So for int I is equal to 1, because we want to start reading our CVS file from the second line, not from the first one, because the first one is just the languages which we're supporting, and then starting from the second line we are actually implementing our words. So we want to start looping from the second line, then I is less than the lines dot length plus I. Okay, so inside this for loop, let's call a string array, let's call it row, would be equal to split line, and we want to pass the lines at I. And then we want to check if our row dot length is more than 1. So that means our language, our word have some translation. If it is, we're gonna call the list of strings words will be equal to new list of strings. We want to populate it with the row. We want to then remove the first item from this list, because if we go back to our row file, as you see, when we read this line, we're gonna have the ID play, and then we will have all of these words, the translations. So we want to remove this ID play. So then when we pass the index for our language, we can request the correct word based on our drop-down value from the Unity. So let's go back to the code, and now we need to call these words dot remove at 0, and let's call language direct dictionary dot add row at 0. So this is our key, and then we want to add the list, which will be words. So this way we're going to populate our dictionary if it's not already loaded. Okay, and then last thing for this function, we want to just return our requested word. So I'm going to create another variable var outside of this f statement. So var values will be equal to language dictionary at ID, and then we want to return the values at language index. Okay, so hopefully this is all clear how this works. So we're gonna pass the ID. So let's say we're searching for the word start. So we're gonna pass our ID play. Sorry, we're searching for the word play. We want to pass our ID play, and then based on the language selected, we're gonna pick one of this word. So this is what this function is doing. Let's save everything, and now let's make use of this function. So now let's actually go to our localization text. Let's remove the update method. Right at the top of this class, let's put attribute required component. We want to make sure we have the type of text, and of course we need to include our Unity UI, unityengine.ui. Make sure you're putting this using statement at the top so the text is recognized. Then we want to add one public variable, so we want to put public string key, and then we want to add the private variable, so private void change language, and then index int, and we want to call the game object dot get component text dot text will be equal to Cvs parser dot get text from ID, and we want to put the index, the key, and then index. Okay, so we can call this parser like that because our get text from ID is a static function and is public. Okay, so make sure you have this function as a static. So we're gonna, in this way, we're gonna assign the correct text to our text box, and then let's call this change language from our start method, and let's pass it 0. So our first language, the default language, will be the first language we stored in our Cvs file, but you can pass any index you like. Is really up to you. So the last class is left to implement is the language dropdown. So let's go to this language dropdown class, and this will be a very simple class. So let's remove this update function. Let's remove these comments. And then let's put, first of all, let's create the action. So static public action, and this action will accept the integer, so int change language. Okay, so this will be our action which we will call when we select different language from our dropdown. And then let's put public dropdown and in order to use this dropdown you need to add the Unity engine.ui, so make sure you put this using statement dropdown, then public text label, and let's create actually function, so public void, and let's call it language selected on language changed, and then we want to check if someone subscribed to our action. So if change language dot is not equal null, if it's not, we're gonna call the change language with the value dropdown dot value. Okay, and then we of course want to assign correct option to our dropdown UI, so dropdown dot caption text dot text will be equal to Cvs parser dot get available languages, and we want to get language from our dropdown dot value. Okay, so when we select the language, we want to request our language read from our Cvs file, and then we want to of course update the label, so label dot text will be equal to dropdown dot caption text dot text. Okay, so we want to make sure the label is updated as well. So let's actually create one more function below the start method. I will create void populate list maybe populate dropdown. So this function will be responsible for adding the option to our dropdown. So let's first call dropdown dot clear option. So make sure the dropdown is cleared before we start to populate it. And then right below, let's call dropdown dot add options, and we want to get our options from Cvs file Cvs parser dot get available languages. And then right at the bottom, we want to of course call our language change function, so all of the UI is updated. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do, and then let's actually call this populate dropdown from our start method. So this is our class for the dropdown. There is last thing to do inside the code. We have implemented our action, but there is no one to listen for it. So we want to use this action in our localization text. So let's switch back to our localization text class. I will press the Ctrl+Shift+M, and let's create function onEnable and onDisable. onEnable, onDisable. You can type it yourself, you don't have to use this shortcut. And then inside the onEnable, let's call actually language dropdown dot change language plus equal, and we want to add this change language function to it. And we can do that because our change language function accepts the integer parameter the same as the action. So we have this integer parameter here. If the parameter inside the function will be different, you cannot use it. Okay, so let's go back to localization text. Let's duplicate this line of code. move it to this on disable, and then make sure you change this plus to minus. So that's it, what we have to do. Let's save everything now. Let's switch back to Unity. And finally we can put all together. So I will just select my main camera, and I will just grab my Cvs parser script onto the main camera. You can create another object for it, but I'm gonna attach it to the main camera. It doesn't really matter. It needs to be placed in the scene. So the next thing is actually put the drop down. So I'm gonna select my drop down, scroll right at the bottom, and then let's grab our language drop down script and put it here. And now we need to populate the drop down variable. So the drop down variable will be our language drop down. So just grab this language drop down and drop it into this field. And then the label is our label text. So let's grab our label and then place it inside the label field. So make sure all those two variables are initialized. And then for any button or any text you want to use the localization text, you need to select the text and you need to place our localization text script. So I will do that. I will add the localization text. And now we need to, this is for our play button. So for the play button, I want to use the ID play. So make sure the ID is matching whatever you have inside your Cvs file. So let's actually check. So for my play, I have the ID play. So I'm gonna copy this ID play. So make sure the ID is matching, and I'm gonna place this inside the key. So this is ID play. Okay, and then let's do the same. Let's actually do the same for the game over. So select the text component, grab localization text script, drop it here, and then for the game over, let's go to our Cvs file, and the ID is ID game over. If you want to add more translations, you need to just create new ID inside your Cvs file, and then basically use this ID inside your game. Just put this correct ID inside the script. So this is the game over script. Okay, so once you've done that, you can go to the file and then save. We can press play. And as you see, our default language is English. If you put this drop down, we have the English, Polish, and then French. So if I select the Polish language, okay, there is nothing happened, and the French language is not updating as well. So as you see, this does not work, and this is because inside our drop down, if you select the language drop down and scroll down to the drop down component, you see the on value changed events. So we didn't add our event to this list. So make sure you press the small plus, then the object will be our language drop down. So I'm gonna select this script and drop it here. And then from the functions, let's select the language drop down script, and we wanna select our function, which I believe it was called language changed. Okay, so this is the function we wanna call whenever we select new value from the drop down. So let's just confirm this is the function language changed. If you open the language drop down script, this is our function. Because it's public, we can use it. So language changed. So every time you change the value inside the dropdown, we're gonna call this function, and we're gonna trigger our language event, which will gonna call the function inside all of our localization texts, and then basically assign the proper language to the text component. So if you go back now to Unity, hit save, press play, and I believe everything should works. So if I select the PL, I have the Polish language, If I select the French, I have the French language. Okay, if you want to add new language, you can go to your resources, localization, just edit this CVS file, and we can put another language. Let's say I want to put, I don't know, Italian language, ETL, I think that's what it's called. I don't know this language, so I'm gonna put the test play and then test game over. Okay, if I save this file now, if I go back to Unity, press play, as you see, the Italy language should be auto-populated to our list, which it is. And then if I select it, I have the test play and test game over. So there is a freedom for you to actually add multiple languages, how many you like, and then let the player select the correct language, or you can pre-select it based on the region using the Google services, if you're making game for the Android. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you will find it useful. Please do let me know if you have any issues or any suggestions. This is not the most efficient implementation of this function. It can be improved in many places, so feel free to comment under this video if you have any ideas or see any issues with the code. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.